Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'll let you get logged in. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. All right. I will get started with the intro and let some other people log in. Welcome, everyone. I'm Emily Hegarty. I'm Program Director at MVG, and I would like to welcome you to our Business of Vineyards webinar on this beautiful Tuesday. What day is it? Yeah, Tuesday afternoon. So I'm going to get us started with a few comments and housekeeping notes. First, just recognizing our annual educational sponsors here on the screen. We thank them for supporting our mission and encourage you to support them as well. I just realized, am I not in presenter mode? Oh, I'm all backwards today. Then for this webinar, we have everyone muted. Normal Zoom etiquette. If you have any questions, please include them in the little Q&A box. You can do that at any time and we'll address them probably one by one with each speaker, but we'll also have Q&A at the end. So anytime a question pops up, pop that right in there. Fear not, this event or this webinar is being recorded. So if you're not logged in or missing a component, don't worry, we will send it out tomorrow or the following day. So you have it in your inbox. And just some upcoming events for the grape growers. We've got a summer solstice event coming on June 21st. It's our first annual, so everyone is invited. All MVG members can attend. It's a great, fun evening at Napa on the longest day of the year. So we hope you come. And also mark your calendars for the Organic Wine Growing Conference that returns on July 25th. So that, I'm going to get out of here and stop sharing my screen. And I will let our two speakers, thought leaders of the industry, if you will, share with us some insights on wine consumers and trends in wine consumption. Dale Stratton will get us started with a macro view of the industry, and Paul Mabray will continue with a zoom in into our valley and what we can do. So with that, I'll let you guys take it from there.
Thank you, Emily, and I'm assuming everybody can see the screen. Thank you very much for the invite. Excited to be here. Real quick for those who don't know me, my name's Dale Stratton. I have two engagements. I work as a private consultant. First one is with Azure Associates here in Napa County, and we do strategic consulting with wine industry people and do mergers and acquisition work. I also do work with the WSWA on a SIP source tool, and we'll look at a little bit of data from them, and that is just the aggregation of depletion data that gives us a very good read for the full wine business and spirits business as to what's going on in the marketplace. So purpose of today is, I said, just to give kind of a macro view as to what's going on. And I always like to go back in time and talk about how we've gotten to where we are. And COVID really did change everything. And when we look at that and we go back to that March of 2020 when COVID hit, first thing that happened was just consumer uncertainty, and the consumer really didn't know what to do. We all had to find a new path and started doing things differently. We came out of that, but then really in February of 2021, the year after that, what it ended up happening is that we had what we refer to as impacted and insulated consumers. There were people who were very much impacted by this. They couldn't go to work. They didn't have income. Their worlds were really, really impacted from a financial standpoint. You had a whole nother group of people that still had jobs. The money was still coming in and they had nowhere to go spend it. So that really drove this period of what we would refer to as irrational spending, and really started spending on luxury goods. And we saw certain categories really take off. We did see some jumps in high-end wine. We saw high-end tequila go crazy. Anything that was in that luxury tier really did well. That was the second year after COVID. But then we started to see consumer uncertainty come back when we had some global uncertainty. The Russia-Ukraine thing happened, some other things happened, and the consumer got to be a little bit edgy. Then in May of 2022, we saw inflation really start to hit. And that's really carried us through all the way till today. And what has happened is that luxury spending has pulled back. We've seen significant drops in what consumers are spending, mostly in that luxury area. Now, that's a relative term to where people are. But the other thing that, as we look at this chart, the other thing that has really been consistent is that every holiday has been very soft. We just have not gotten the bump that we were getting in previous years previous to COVID around that holiday season and spending on beverage alcohol and things along that line. So digging into the consumer and talking about this, it's really important to understand that more than ever, today's consumer really is a total beverage alcohol consumer. They consume across all three categories. Really, what this chart is showing that 10 years ago, households that bought beer, wine, and spirits was 23% of the households. It's now 40% of the households. They used to account for 52% of the volume. That volume in dollars is now up to 65%. So the consumer is spending across all categories, and we as a wine category are having to really fight more. And there's a lot of gray space. We've seen flavored malt beverages grow, canned cocktails, hard seltzers. There's just a lot of blurring. As a matter of fact, there's probably not a product out there that doesn't have the word hard put in front of it. When you get to hard Mountain Dew or hard Sunny Delight, you know that you're definitely in a place. This is data that is from BW 166. So this is tax paid shipments. And I think this is really important to understand that the wine category had unprecedented growth. And it was at 20 plus years that we really saw phenomenal growth. And I've often said that, you know, predicting what was going to happen in the wine category at a macro level was really pretty easy because it was almost like an annuity. We were going to grow somewhere in that 1.5 to 3.5% in volume. Dollars were going to grow above that because the consumer continues to trade up and buy better wine and consume better wine. But then when COVID hit, well, actually before COVID, we started to see that eroding. We just were not seeing the growth, and that really started to hit right over in here about 2018. We started to see this inch down. There was this huge bump in COVID, and a lot of that, again, this is tax paid data. So a lot of that was imports that couldn't get in, couldn't find transportation. So post COVID, we just saw this huge amount of increase coming. And since then, after that, we've now seen this steady decline. My view is that we're not going to be in this area where we're going to see a 2% decline in volume that we're experiencing right now, but we're not going to go back to that 2.5% volume growth rate either. It's going to settle out, and we're going to find something that's really kind of more in the middle of all those. Something interesting is that during that boom in consumption, we also saw this nice little line of the growth in the number of wineries. So, and this is anything. It could be a virtual winery. It doesn't necessarily have to be brick and mortar. These are just registered wineries. So between 2013 and 2020, we saw a 5.1% increase in the number of wineries every year. Those were driven largely by smaller wineries, very small wineries. However, what we now see since 2021, we've seen that growth rate drop down to 1.7, where we're just not getting them. We believe that it's possible that we'll see in 2024, actually for the first time in my memory, fewer wineries, fewer registered wineries. We'll see if that happens. With an ample supply of bulk wine, that there tends to be people who try and enter in the negotiate model. We'll see if that happens. But the net of it is we've seen that pull back. Interestingly, we're seeing a similar pattern in beer. This is just the total number of U.S. breweries. This is from the Brewers Association. And we see from 2015 to 2022, there was a 10.6% annual growth rate, compound annual growth rate in the number of US breweries. All at once get to 2023, and that number dropped down below 1%. It's possible that this number will be less than it was a year ago when we get to the end of 2024. A lot of this has to do, of course, with capital interest rates. Same thing's happening in spirits. This is from the American Craft Spirits Association from 2016 to 2022, 12.8% growth in the number of craft spirit producers out there, number of craft distilleries. So huge growth in that 2016 to 22. Get to 2023, that number dropped to 1.6. So we're seeing this drop in the number of things that are happening. As I said, interest rates are playing something to do with that, the available capital for them to do that as well. Net of it is, and this is looking at beer, wine, and spirits, and we've got a growth rate. This data comes from SipSource on the wine and spirits side. It comes from the brewers, the Beer Institute on the other side, on the beer side. What we see here is that every category has dropped, and if we go back, the numbers on the left hand side on where we were in December of 2020 to end that year, you see pretty decent growth rates, especially spirits. Spirits were going crazy. Beer has always, has kind of that long-term been steady. But when we look at this, we see that everything has turned into the negative. As we come out of April, we're seeing a little bit of an upturn. We believe that will happen. It's going to be a rough couple of months here, probably just based on some timing things. But in the back half of the year, we do anticipate things will improve. But we don't anticipate that any of these are necessarily going to get back into the position of being in a growing position. This is volume, not dollars. Dollars are better because we do have small amounts of premiumization happen in most categories. What this is also driven, and this is interesting information, and this is from the United States Census Bureau. They just on a monthly basis asked the wholesale trade what is their inventory level and what were their sales. How many dollars do you have on hand versus how many dollars did you sell? And you can see that back here from 1992 all the way up into 2006, that ratio of inventory to sales was 1.14. So for every dollar of sales they had $1.14 of inventory on hand. That jumps up from 2008 up to 2021. And that ratio slowly grew to where it got to 1.30. However, what has happened since 2021 is we've seen this huge jump. You saw this spike in inventory. Sales have stayed fairly steady, fairly flat, while inventory after that big spike has leveled off. Now, part of that is, as we said, coming out of the pandemic, people were just trying to get as much inventory as they had. Trying to get transportation was difficult. So these wholesalers were getting inventory, trying to get inventory so they had things to sell, kind of throwing away some of their supply chain best practices. However, what also happened is that we saw what was going to be predicted to be a pretty steady line of sales has flattened out. So we have this big gap right now where the ratio has now gone from $1.14 in inventory for dollar sales to that ratio being $1.60. This could impact shipments, and we anticipate it'll impact shipments. We do believe a lot of this inventory, this is likely higher in spirits because those are the things that took the largest hit, and that inventory is very expensive. Inflation has been difficult, and interest rates have been difficult. You see over there, the little inset chart on the left shows you what's happened with interest rates. Most everybody's living that on a day-to-day basis. We understand that. We understand inflation as well. On the chart, the black bar represents kind of the height of where it was in December of 22, and then what the inflation rate is now reported from the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the end of April 24. So it has come down, but it still exists. Also, the interesting thing that we see in the boxes on the right-hand side, that Food away from home, so food that is consumed in restaurants, prices at restaurants have definitely gone up more than food at home. For total food, it's a 4.1% increase versus a 1.1 on food. And we see down there on wine that at home pricing has gone up 1.2%, where away from home has gone up 3.4%. That has held true. That has been very, very steady, what we've seen. Would also tell you that in the on-premise, from day one, we have seen spirits recover in the on-premise at a much faster pace than wine has. The share of volume done in the on-premise still is not back to where it was pre-pandemic for wine, where it has surpassed that for spirits. Spirits are definitely winning the occasion in the on-premise. DTC, very important to everybody. I know Paul's going to dig in a whole lot on DTC. Again, in 2023, we saw the prices, average retail price really jump up. And in total, for total DTC wine, the price was up 7.1% in 23 versus 22. We know that in 2020, it was a very low price when the price really dropped, when you couldn't get into restaurants and that retail was a bit clogged. However, we're still seeing this great growth, 7.1%. And then that standout on average price, Napa at $86.43 is the average price. Napa is the king here. Napa continues to command premium pricing, and we believe that that will continue to be true. Just wanted to pop in 2 quick slides about the consumer. This is Wine Market Council data, and I think the Wine Market Council has done a great job for many, many years tracking the wine consumer. They've done this study. This is from their benchmark study, and they have done this since the late 1990s. And basically what we're looking at here is that 20% of total adult consumers in this country drink wine once a week or more often. We call those core drinkers. It's about 50 million people. That 50 million adults drive the wine industry. They really do determine what's going on. These are the high frequency wine consumers. Over the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, around 5 or 6 years, we've seen that number kind of variate between 18 to 21. That 20% is a pretty good number on what that is. Marginal wine drinkers are people who participate in the category, but they do it less than once a week, but more often than every 2 or 3 weeks. So these people are drinking across all categories, and they're definitely choosing wine, but it's not their core beverage necessarily. That's 14% of the population. That did go up here recently, but compared to 10 years ago, that number's a fair bit smaller than it was. We then have 29% of the population. This is 72 million people. These are people who drink spirits and beer, but don't participate in the wine category. And that 29% is really, when you go back to 25 years, this is really where the wine category drew a lot of people from. They were able to convert people who were beer and spirits drinker into the wine category, and that's how we grew wine volume. Then you have 10% of the population just drinks alcohol a couple of times a year. Then you have this abstainer bucket. That's 27% of the population. That's been pretty solid. But 68 million people, adults in this country, don't participate in the beverage alcohol category at all. This is a segment that probably stands a chance of growing as we go forward, which can be a little concerning. And then they like to look at this and break this out by age. And the thought process, and we would all believe this, that as you age, you drink more wine. Makes perfect sense that you reach this age of affluence, your disposable income changes, you start to try new things, and consumers convert to wine. However, there's just this group of people up here, this 50 to 59, that never really converted to wine. Only 17% of them are core wine consumers. The group out here at the 70 plus, and granted the 60 to 69, 22 and 21, part of the issue with this core wine drinker over 70, that could be a much larger number, except more and more of them are abstaining, right? We have situations where medical reasons, pharmaceutical reasons kick in, where there's just more abstainers out here. These are looking pretty good, but we still have this big group of people back here that are non-adopters. And there is some concern here about this young consumer who is abstaining and they're drinking beverage alcohol less frequently. So that's the backdrop of where we are and what's going on with it. Key takeaways for me: wine category volume is unlikely to grow in the medium term. We still have it, and we have to remember that more than half of the volume in this country is done under $8, and that's not going to grow. That segment's going to continue to contract. The troubles we're having right now, they will pass. The question is when. The category, we hear stories of the demise of the wine category. We hear stories about everything's fine. My belief is that we're in the middle. Category's having some struggles right now. It's going to be fine, but we're going to be a little bumpy here for a few years. Napa remains special and will continue to command premium pricing. And I will tell you, in everything that we work on, whether it's an M&A project, consulting, analyzing the business, Napa is different. Napa is special and will continue to be so. We'll end this conversation after Paul does his portion of this. And really, I think category attributes really line up well with consumer values. And how do we get that? And that young consumer, what we offer as a category really is what they're looking for. They want an experiential lifestyle. They're looking for experiences. We have great experience. Wine is a natural product, and low interference and not a lot of additives. The consumer wants those things. We have that. Also, wine is the beverage of moderation, serving with food. These are attributes that we think the young consumer wants. The question is, are we effectively communicating those on a broad basis? Wine category is going to be fine. I believe there's going to be a shakeout over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be a little bit bumpy. It won't be for the faint of heart, but we're going to be fine, and the category will be continue to be a big force and be meaningful to the consumer. So with that, thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing, and I will turn that over to Paul Mabray.
Dale, what's the name of the cow behind you, by the way?
That's Clifford.
Hey, that was great. Thanks. Well, obviously, I'm not as tall or smart as Dale, for sure. So what I will share is what's going on kind of on a more micro level, and especially as it relates to kind of Napa Valley and kind of where we need to go. You may or may not know me. I'm kind of the geek of the wine industry. My job is to predict the future as it relates to wine and technology, because I think that's the core element that's going to get us going forward. So let me start off by saying the obvious. We live in the most competitive market in human history. I've said this line every year for almost 15 years, and it's always been true. So what that means is, let me say it again. We live in the most competitive market in human history, and it's going to keep getting harder. I know that there's a lot of pressures associated with the macro, but it's competitive in so many different ways. First off, it's not just about wine anymore. Just as Dale described, most consumers are omni consumers. They're not just drinking wine, but they're drinking hard kombucha or having a THC gummy, or there's lots of more adult products being brought into the market again and again. In fact, that's kind of the norm, and it's going to continue to be the norm, where people drink across categories and the dollar amounts that they do. So they may start with a cocktail, may go to a glass of wine, and end the night, like I said, with a gummy. Unfortunately, out of all of the categories, we are the most expensive per ounce. Our buzz per buck is much higher. And wine, despite what everyone else has said, we are all in the luxury category now. So if you look at average prices for direct to consumer, every region is over $40. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many average consumers that drink a bottle of $40 bottle of wine every single night. So Napa, being unique and special, has achieved the pinnacle of price right now and still growing, fortunately. I think that the pricing forecasts by a lot of the press of us being outpriced of the market are completely incorrect. I think that we have other ways to maintain that kind of velocity, but not the way that we're doing it today for sure. But we are special, as Dale said. So I think we all know that we've been growing for a very long time. I think what's both challenging and exciting about this time in our industry's period is that for almost 2 decades, we really haven't had to adapt and change to become better at what we do. And now that sales are flat or even down in lots of cases, it's our time to adapt and revisit how we make wine special in the category and take our place in the market. Unfortunately, consumption around the world, not just with wine, but with all alcohol, has gone down. And as a result, we're seeing that in our volumes pretty significantly, which is very scary right now, I think. Obviously, the entire market's concerned. It's been especially hard after quite the bump from COVID. And then I'm not as worried as everybody else. I think that we have a lot more opportunity. This is a time for us to really adapt and grow the market in ways that we haven't seen before. And I think because we haven't been as versatile, that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for us to obtain more sales and more customers. So obviously, we're the Napa Valley grape growers and the Napa Valley vintners and the Napa Valley, which is kind of the lifeblood of what we've become is around direct-to-consumer. And that's been kind of what's been professed as the future of how we're going to keep the industry moving forward. And selling DTC is actually pretty natural for us. I mean, it's a beautiful place. We have absolutely stunning, amazing wines. There's a joke that if you can't sell wine when someone comes to Napa Valley, you have really bad problems or really crummy wine. We have these amazing tasting rooms. It's to the point of almost an arms race, candidly. And it's hard to maintain that. But the experiences across the valley just keep up-leveling and up-leveling. And it doesn't matter if you are a boutique, small family-owned farm winery, it's still better and better the way the consumers get to experience the valley. But we have a terrible business model. We ask people to get on an airplane or to get in a car, drive up to our valley, we sell them wine, and then we send them home so we can ship it home to them. That would be almost like saying, I'm going to go down to San Jose to test drive a Tesla, and then I'm going to go home and have you ship the Tesla to me. It's a very brittle and fragile model, and it's got limited output for it. So that funnel is very small, and we're experiencing that in a lot of ways in our DTC. As a result of that, though, we've become very hyper-dependent on really some key markets. So these are 4 different wineries. The green, it represents the amount of consumers from that state. So as you can notice, almost every single one of these wineries has pretty much a very, very green element in California, and then a little bit more in the kind of usual suspects, Texas, Illinois, Florida, and New York. But when you look past that, this is probably that green actually represents around 85 to 90% of the consumers that buy direct consumers come from California. And then most of those consumers, I don't have a map, actually come from within 90 miles of us or from LA. So we're all kind of feeding off this very small footprint of consumers. Why do I mention that? Why do I speak to that? Well, because it's a pretty big country. And as Dale said, there are 50 million people that drink wine as a core thing, but we're really only selling to a small subset of that entire grouping. And it's not just because of shipping, it's because of how we acquire the customers. We're also struggling pretty significantly with the press. I think I had a mentor once, he said, it's easy for people to throw rocks when you're standing at the top of the hill. And I think that that's very true. The Chronicle has had a real fun time making a mockery of Napa for some reason. I guess if it bleeds, it leads. And they continue to pick on the wine industry as it relates to what's going wrong with it without looking at it through a business lens. That's not helpful for us. And they especially pick on Napa. I'm sure many of you have seen that consistently. But there is some truth to it. It's not as bad as these 2 shots here, which is Pike's Place in Seattle before COVID and during COVID. You can see how quiet it was. but we are down in tourism and taxes. The TOT revenues that we get from hotels have decreased from 14, almost 15 million to almost 14 million in a year. So there's a lot of theories around that. Some people attribute it to high weekday hotel fees, that people are day tripping versus staying overnight. But if you live in Napa, you've seen it's never been busier on the weekends. But many restaurants are talking about the weekdays struggling, and many wineries are struggling. And it's not because of the tourism; it's actually because of something else. So in the old days, any of us in the wine industry remember maps that look like this in Napa Valley, which was pretty sparse, a few wineries here and there. And differing the rest of the wine industry, which Dale pointed out that we are flat in wineries, Napa Valley wine licensing just continues to keep growing. We keep adding more wineries and brands in a small geographic footprint. We are over-indexed as wineries, and we're very hyper-dependent on this industry, which is a good thing, but also has a lot of fragility and weaknesses. And so what's happened is there's so many wineries to go to. So even if we're seeing 4 million people, that 4 million people is dispersed. That's at peak, by the way. It's dispersed across the entire valley. So wineries are seeing less people, not just because there's more of them, but because of other reasons. Also, we're doing this thing called seated tastings. So many of us are old enough to remember. I know I probably don't look old enough, but I'm definitely old enough to remember when you used to be able to belly up at the bar at 4 or 5 wineries in a day, have multiple tastings. There was a spit bucket. Very different than today's wine tastings. So now we have seated tastings. They take anywhere from 1 to 3.5 hours. I don't think you see a spit bucket anywhere to be seen. And so it really slows the pace. So in the old days, you could see, like I said, in a weekend, 4 to 8 wineries. Now you'll see maybe 1 to 3 wineries in a whole weekend, right? Maybe 4 at the very most because of that. And it takes up a lot of the time of people. And this is happening all over everywhere. It's not just Napa. It's happening everywhere that there's a wine country. Where Napa goes, everyone follows. And we do it because it helps qualify the consumer, helps us do a better job selling to the consumer, but it also makes it so that we're distributing the consumers less around the valley. It's slowing the pace down very much so, as you can imagine, to where, as I said, we're seeing maybe a group of 4 people see 2 wineries in a weekend. That's very hard to fill up the wineries that are growing at a rapid rate. And because we're drinking, many people don't want to do more than one, especially with abstinence. So they'll drink one day, they'll go to the hotel and they'll go have dinner, right? Again, swallowing those dollars in the pocket and not spreading them across the multiple wineries. And as a result, there's not that many dollars to share across the valley as well. So even if we're seeing the same amount of tourism, the same amount of people, those dollars are going to less people, and those people are going to less wineries. So I know it feels a little tough. It feels a little intimidating, a little daunting. What are we going to do out there? So many people ask, should we make better wine? I don't think I can ask a single Napa Valley winery if they make bad wine. I think everyone's making great wine, especially compared to the 70s and 80s. There's not a bad bottle of wine in this valley, actually. Scores are not going to be the answer. So oftentimes people say, go score the wines. But as you know, the scores have gotten to a smaller and smaller ratio. And in the old days, the scores could move the market. You could get a 92, 93, 94, 98, 99, 100-point wine would sell your wine out. You can go on Wine Still Sold Out, Last Bottle, Wine Access, and you can find wines at 97, 98, 99 points selling for half price. So scores are not going to be our savior in this. I also don't think that by adding new flavor profiles, and there's a big natural wine kick that's kind of a denigration marking and kind of a deceptively playing to the health benefits that aren't there, because it's definitely not the flavor benefits, I'll have you know. But I don't think that that's going to increase our category by any means. There's obviously, it's additive. It'll create new subsegments, but it's not going to be the panacea. And then I think we've played out the models, especially in Napa Valley, of using supply, demand, Veblen goods, all of those things to help stimulate growth. In fact, I think that consumer demand is changing the way that we look at wines, because the days of cult wines are very different than they were in the 90s when Harlan and Screaming Eagle and Scarecrow came out. There's so many wines of so limited supply that you can find a new cult wine without having to stay on a list on that. And then last but not least here around that, a lot of people are touting that we should have all this certification or follow this. And believe me, mind you, make no mistake, these are all very important. These are all things that we should be doing anyways. But many of you, I'm sure, in the wine industry probably don't even recognize half of these labels. I didn't until I researched them. And more importantly, consumers don't. And they don't buy based upon sustainability or anything. They buy based on other factors. This is the last lever to help them choose the wine. So quickly before as I tie up, what can we do different? What does Napa Valley need to do to step in to really kind of maintain our growth? Keep buying grapes at the premium level from all of you who are growing them, and keep selling wine at premium. Well, the first thing we need to look at, and this is not biased based upon my own perspective, is we live in a digital culture. This is a digital world, right? I can ask every one of you if you've been on Google today, bought on Amazon anytime this month, or even use social media of any sort, and every one of you would raise your hands. But if you ask the wineries in the valleys if they're doing those tools and using them to connect and sell to their customers, I guarantee that it's a very low percentage. And the proof is in the pudding, actually. This is the most recent breakdown of a winery's direct-to-consumer sales. And as you can see, only 6% of the total is sold online. Now, put that in comparison to other CPG industries, they're approaching 18 to 20%, right? So we're way lagging. At one point during COVID, we made a big jump, but we went back to selling to ecotourism, where people get on a plane, fly here, and that represents right now probably around 56% of our sales come through that. When you account the wine club and the tasting room, are primarily from people visiting. So that to me speaks to a huge opportunity of how do we sell to these people when they go home, or how do we sell people that don't get on a plane and maintain it? And if we can solve that problem, I think we're going to have a much healthier industry as it relates to Napa Valley, especially. We have a lot of investments to make. We're starting from a deficit. I will say with all authority that the wine industry is probably the last industry to adopt technology in a meaningful way. I also think that we're not aligning ourselves with the consumer needs state, right? Almost like a Maslow hierarchy of needs. So there's a concept in technology called jobs to be done. As an example, have any of you ever heard of the Patagonia toothfish? This is one ugly fish. And it's one of the best fish, fastest growing, great white meat, flavors, profiles. But the guys that fish it couldn't sell it to save their lives for a while. Until they surveyed their customers and found out what their customers really wanted, the job to be done, right, which was matching it. And I'm sure you've heard of it called Chilean sea bass instead. I think that's very similar that we need to look at in the wine industry, which is just like jobs to be done. People don't buy skateboard parts to own skateboard parts. They buy skateboard parts to skate. We don't buy wine around tasting notes, around understanding if it's blackberry and cassis or butter and vanilla. We buy it to drink with our friends and our family. It is the most social beverage of all of the adult beverages, to Dale's point. It's meant for sharing. It's meant for meals. It is one of the things that has held us tight against some of the other adult categories. I'm not breaking open a bottle of whiskey at dinner and having it with my steak and friends, right? So I also think that we need to, again, follow technology and look, how do we approach the market differently and not keep copying each other? If you can say biodynamic, organic, family owned, there's a million different phrases that we're all using. If we keep using the same phrases, we're not going to win the market. And as to Dale's point, we are the healthiest adult beverage. We are the most natural adult beverage. How do we start conveying that above RTDs or, other drinks that are not as healthy? And then last, we have to learn to fail. As an industry, I think we all are scared of failure because we only have one swing at the plate, unlike beer, where if you ruin a batch, you can make more beer. We have one vintage, one set of grapes. So it makes us very fear averse, and we need to learn how to kind of fail forward in that piece and invest more in the category. And last but not least, it's about investment for us. I told you that the technology category of us, we're not investing in that. We're the farthest behind as it relates to how we are spending money against technology or digital. So it's going to be like a fish model. For a while, it's not going to pay dividends, and then it's going to hockey stick up, and we will get hard return on what we do from wineries, it's going to pay dividends in us being able to sell to people in Boston and Austin, in Florida and Alaska. And to do so, we're going to have to invest in both R&D, and we're going to have to invest in people. These are people that are in the technology space that are great growth people. I don't think a single winery here would hire them as a winemaker because they don't know how to make wine. But we do the opposite. We have a lot of people that work in our wineries, but we hire them to do digital when they don't have any expertise. So we have to invest in those people, and we have to invest continuously. Otherwise, just like a credit card, if we don't invest, the interest will catch us. And like we did in the fires, by not investing in the infrastructure, we experienced a pretty terrible experience here in California that we all can relate to. But at the end of the day, I think the wineries themselves need to care about the consumers, not just when they come here, but when they go home. I think I'll let that open to questions now at this point, and join with my handsome friend, Dale Stratton.
Dale left the chat. Just kidding.
He's left.
Thank you both. That was really great information. I know our members have a question pending already, that it was, you've talked a lot about the wineries and how they can, improve their communications and share the stories that will encourage, and everything you said, wine is such a natural product that wine, share that and emphasize that. But what about the growers that are selling grapes to the wineries? Is there an opportunity there for the growers to get more involved and kind of share what they are doing?
Without question. I think there's no question that storytelling is part of our industry. And the good news about our industry is we have a story to tell every year, right? It's a changing story. It's an evolving story. I was with Bearden Winery, Sleeping Giant in Carneros, which is a Napa-based winery, and they source from small boutique family-owned vineyards, and they want to tell that story.
Mhm.
Of course, because they're a family-owned winery that expresses that, and that's something special. And we're still a farming community, so yes.
Yeah, and I think, Emily, when I think about that question, to me, it's how do we get all oars rowing at the same time, right? And one of the issues we have, and with our categories, we're very fragmented. We have so many special places, and we always talk about those special places, and we seem to do all this on a micro level, but we never talk about the macro level. We aren't able to get to that. Here's why wine should be the beverage of choice. Let's start there, talk about wine, and then on an individual basis, get down more to it. So absolutely, growers can do something. I just get nervous when I think, okay, we're going to really focus in on why Napa Valley grape growers need to go do it. It's like, wait a minute, how do we get all that money pooled up so that we can be effective on getting to consumers about category wine in general? And I think Paul talked about this. What are the need states, right? What are consumers looking for, and how do we get that unified message out there? And we're a very unique category. Our category is really, really difficult. And one of the quotes that stuck with me, Greg Carpenter, who teaches marketing at Northwestern, said, his first category he's ever seen, where he'll talk to a consumer. The consumer will try a bottle of wine and say, "That's the greatest bottle of wine I've ever had. I can't wait to try something different." Right? And that's something we have to deal with, especially as price goes up. Yeah. Right? As price goes up, the consumer becomes less loyal. And that's a really unique situation that our category has.
Yeah, they're inherently promiscuous in their selection because they have the ability to be. I mean, we're the largest category. Yeah. But we have stories to tell behind that, to be honest with you, again, both on the micro and the macro level, fundamentally. But I think that to Dale's point also is that we as an industry need to stop looking at each other as competitors and look at the other categories as competitors.
Right, absolutely.
And I would also say certainly those that are against beverage alcohol in a strong way, that's really the other place that we have to kind of get our arms around.
That's right. The WHO and all of the anti-alcohol lobbying, we're just getting lumped into the really bad stuff. And don't get me wrong, we have some that, but like we're getting lumped into that. But we heard ourselves, Emily. I mean, there's a lot of denigration marketing, which speaks to this Hispanic consumer question at the top, which is,
Right.
candidly, one of the problems we have in the industry is, look, we are all love boutique winemakers. I'm a gigantic fan. That's the lifeblood of what's special about us as well. But we tend to like to denigrate the big wine associated with that, and that's just self-inflicting harm. As an example with Hispanic, Stella Rosa has brought more Hispanic consumers to the category than any other wine in history, and it has jalapeno infused wine, and you and I may not drink it, and it may not be our cup of tea, but the fact of the rest of the critics and everyone else saying what a terrible thing is and how it's not wine is just harmful for their category.
Right.
And I do think, I think it's really important that we as a category have acknowledged that we have an opportunity there, and that we've not communicated effectively to consumers who are not core consumers over the long haul. The beer industry and the spirits industry have been talking to the Hispanic and the Black consumer forever and communicating with them, and we just never have. And I do think one thing, just I read reports where they say, look, the percentage of wine consumption with Hispanics is going up. Be careful, because that's true of every category in a grocery store. The Hispanic population is growing. Of course, it's going to go up, but is it going up at pace with the population? And that's what I think we really have to make sure that we're looking at. Let's not benchmark ourselves to failure.
Absolutely. And I think also wine is a much more intimidating beverage compared to beer and spirits. So that experience. For those of you who can't see all the questions coming in, the question was, do you have any data on Hispanic consumers and how they're growing? So thank you for that. We can go into the next question. We've got a few. Okay. It seems that growers who have small lot wines to sell are at a serious disadvantage to larger corporate wineries. How can the industry support smaller family-owned growers and wine sales?
You want me to start, Dale, or you want to go?
As my career was built on the two largest wine companies, you might want to go first.
I don't think that we're at a disadvantage. I think that we choose not to use the tools that allow us to sell more efficiently. I mean, there's never been a better time to be a small winery to compete with Constellation. If you went back 2 decades ago, it was hard, right? DTC was not easy. To buy software to do it was expensive. Now the tools are all commoditized. It's very easy to compete from a tool and marketing. And so I think that, and it's hard for those guys to do DTC because they don't make wine at that high price point with that kind of intimate storytelling. Actually, I think they're disadvantaged, but we have to invest in making sure the stories are told, and that people have to do outreach and all of the kind of core principles of customer marketing, consumer marketing.
I think you hit it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Sam.
So recognizing the uniqueness of Napa that is earned, is there any thoughts about positioning, whether it be cost or experiences, for next generation consumers to be able to afford and access the experience? Just general thoughts on affordability. That's another tough one.
Since you went
And
first,
it's not just wine. It's also, as you said, like the tourism, hotel stays as well.
It's hard because any way you slice it, costs are going up, and so as costs go up, you've got to do something. You can't price yourself into bankruptcy. But I do think that how do you is there a way to make a wine of a second label at a lower price, and can you do that? And is there a way to do that? That can be an entryway. Is there a time of year where you can lower tasting fees and advertise that tasting fees, right? The $200 tasting is hard to stomach that, and so to me, it's think about promotion, think about how you do it, think about when your slow times are, and do something there. And I would rather have potential customers in my winery paying a smaller fee when I'm empty anyway, when I'm going to be slow anyway, right? That to me is, I think, one of those things. I do think, and Paul talked a lot about tourism and the tourists that are coming. I do think one of the things that has happened in Napa, and if we all go back 15 years, not a lot to do in Napa after 7 p.m. And
I remember those days.
yeah, right. So we've done a great job of building tourism, and we're bringing more. We had this boom of bringing more tourists in, but we're not bringing in as many core wine consumers, right? The percentage of tourists that are coming to visit, it's a smaller percentage that are actually core wine consumers who want to do that. So it is, how do we think of, instead of, right, look, two ways to grow your business. You can get those who currently buy your product to buy more, or you can get more to buy your product. We as an industry have focused on getting those who currently buy our category to buy more. We need to focus on how do we get more people to join the category and increase household penetration. So that was really a long-winded answer. I don't even know if I answered it. Right?
No, it's a tough one though. I mean, we're walking a razor's wire, which we want to maintain the luxury thing, price point. And I mean, like, I think that we need to build the pinnacle of the hill. This is the tower on the hill, and our job is not to lower Napa to be, there's a Monte Carlo, there's an Aspen, there's places that people go aspirationally in life, and Napa is that epicenter for wine in the world. I do think there are ways that we can find other experiences that are less, maybe interstitials in the valley to do that. But I don't think that, this notion that we're going to target millennials or even Gen Z is a ridiculous notion on its face. I mean, as a young kid, I could not buy a $40 bottle of wine. So saying that is just an absurd concept. And anyone that tells us Napa we should be marketing to the younger generation doesn't understand the economics of earning potential and luxury, luxury goods. So it's going to be an interesting challenge for us as a category. I think that to Dale's point is, how do we get people here that go back and buy the wine back at home, or how do we get them during the slow times? And that's where I think we're struggling, is the midweek traffic.
Yeah.
You look on weekends, we are packed. But on midweek is where the restaurants are having trouble. And I'm not sure what the answer is there.
Well, okay, we might have one, because someone shared I had a pint at Fieldworks at Napa last weekend and saw a family-friendly environment with every table filled, smiling customers, and an overall welcoming environment. Can wine consumption ever evolve to a beer hall style model that opens up to larger audiences? There you go.
Well, they have lots of that. They have the wine on tap is a big category that's growing, right? I mean, if you talk to the people, and I just think it's, how do we get the price point to get to low enough buzz per buck, or
right,
especially with Napa on the back end, it's hard to get a Napa bottle of wine under what? Like a Napa cab under $40 is pretty hard to do.
Not happening.
Yeah, so it's a tough challenge for us as a brand. We got that more entry level. I don't know. It's challenging.
And how do we draw consumers into the vineyard using digital tools? Have you seen any successful tactics in action?
I have not, but I don't think we're telling the stories about the vineyards very well. I mean, I think that functionally we don't talk about them as living, breathing or things. We just talk about them as vineyards, or Napa as bulk. They're the branded single vineyards sometimes do. But like I said, I was at Sleeping Giant today. They had 4 vineyards. We should be telling the story about that all year round.
Look, I think that that's really a fabulous idea, right? And with drone technology, being low, with all of this stuff that you can do, being able to do this, man, I think that, and we talk about experiential. Maybe don't sell a wine tasting. Maybe sell a vineyard tour. I belong to one winery club, and I belong to that winery club because they have a hiking and a picnic option, right? Not because I love the wines, but I want to go and do something different, and I want to be out there. So to me, it is, and I think we underutilize the vineyard as a draw, especially to Paul's point with younger consumers. And And man, hey, come out, for $10 a head. Well, that's too low, probably $20, right? But
I
we'll
mean,
take
yeah.
we'll take you in the vineyard and talk to you about the vineyard. And to me, that's so exciting. And even, it's funny just walking around my neighborhood here. It's just exciting to see the phases of the plant and see, right, where and it was just that uh, like I went away for 1 week and I came back and it's like, okay, where the hell did all these leaves come from? Man, like it's like, wham, it just got green. So I think there is so much that can be done there, and it can be done virtually. That to me is the other thing to club members. Right. I think that and retention of club, that to me is, talk to your vineyard manager. Winemaker is important, but we know that the vineyard worker is really the backbone of the industry.
There's so much in the vineyard too. It's not just the vines. I mean, like I said, I keep using Sleeping Giant because I was there this morning, but they have 30 bird feeders that they do to use natural, they've got the worm thing for the water. They've got, I mean, there's so many stories associated. It's rattlesnake season right now, and Napa Valley features. I mean, there's so much just in there to talk about, and especially the way that we are stewards of the land beyond anybody else. There's not other industry that cares about the earth as much as the wine industry, I'd say, in terms of outbev.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And even just to think about a grapevine, like if you've newly planted a vineyard, show that. We got right. Go get video of that. Here it is, and then
Put a camera time lapse.
yeah,
Show
right.
it grow.
And then and then in 3 years, by the way, hey, remember when you saw this? This is what it looked like then. Now we're pulling fruit off of it. Check it out, right? It's so. I just think there's so much creativity that can be done around the vineyard that makes a lot of difference and will appeal to consumers.
It's the thing
New
where the
consumers.
guys take pictures of their face every day, or gals, you do that for
Right. I mean, yeah.
they didn't.
Heck, people do it with their babies every day.
Yeah, yeah. Moves a little
I'm
slow.
jumping down because there's a related question on. So, is there any work to be done to support tours or visits in the vineyard? It seems only properties with winery permits can support visitors. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I'm not sure you guys do either, but it's something that we can look into and share.
Yeah,
I give no legal advice.
yeah, the vineyards can go everywhere. I mean, they don't have
I
to
would
be.
imagine, yeah, you could. I mean, I know MVG staff has toured vineyards that are just, there's no winery associated with them, and that's been okay. But yeah, TBD, we'll see.
Talk to the VC downtown, right? Visit Napa Valley, put a little mini vineyard there, like the college has.
But look, again, I think the opportunity for vineyard can be so great to take home, right? That's where you can push that out and get that experience everywhere because of video.
So
Right.
many.
And then, okay, so what are the priority investments in digital a winery should make? Is it CRM, digital advertising, videography, photography? What do you think?
Look at your e-commerce store and your website right out of the gate. But I think more importantly than that, it starts actually more fundamental than the actual digital tools. It's the value exchange. What are you giving the consumer that they want more than just wine? What's the feeling you're giving them? Because and if you look at I was very fortunate. I got to lead Nebom Coppola's wine club, and we went up and down the valley and surveyed all the wineries, and they were all giving the same thing: a couple of bottles every other month or every quarter. Take 4 tastings a year, one. And we did the opposite. So that was a different value exchange that we gave, and we went from 0 to 3,000 wine club members in 6 months. That's a hockey stick, because we gave something different and understood that we weren't just doing the same. Again, the blue ocean strategy. I think you got to start there. And then all of the e-commerce stuff will work its way there. Because otherwise, the greatest mystery in the world is, why does someone want to buy your wine, taste unseen, at an average price point of $70 across the country, with ratings between $90 and $95 without getting a discount? Why do they do that? What's going to make someone jump through that digital hurdle? And that's the value exchange. It has nothing to do with anything else.
Paul, what's your view on content, right? And I just video, and I think about this, right? And I think having a discussion with my wife recently about what percentage of the population right now makes a living off of content creation. And if you were to go back 30 years, what does that look like? And I mean, that is such an explosion that content creation. And man, it just seems like our categories, I seem to be harping on this, seems to be so ripe for that.
It's so right. And the problem with it is, to your point, it's a great place for it. And it's also, we're in the really inundated world where it's noisier than it's ever been. And the content pollution, I would say, is equal
Yeah.
to awesome content creation. But part of our problem is the same thing that happened when we went from wine writers to wine bloggers. The industry denigrated them. They said, look, these terrible bloggers. And now we go to the TikTokers or influencers and we denigrate them. And the reality of those, they move the needle for people. And what's happened is influencer went from being a byproduct of success to being a profession.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just a matter of how do we use them, how do we leverage them, and how do we get what we need from them. And we always look to them as a tool to increase sales versus maybe they're just a cheap content creator for us.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, final question is, can you explain how changing wine labels affects consumption? So example, the zero residual sugar or gluten-free vegan wine. I can't say I've had vegan wine.
It's ridiculous. Go on. I'll let Dale go.
So when I was at Wine Market Council, we did a study on the pending nutritional, right? And to me, you have the two things. Is it nutritional guidelines, whatever that might be? I'm convinced that putting nutritional guidelines on wine will help the category. People think that there are a lot more calories and a lot more sugar in a glass of wine than there actually is. And that really bared out in our research that that would be the case. And so to me, on the nutritional labeling side, I think that's great. Ingredient labeling is going to be really, really hard, and you're going to get into a lot of legal wrangling about is it an ingredient if it is in the product, if it's not in the product after it's finished, right? You've got a whole long list of things that's going to happen on ingredient labels. Today's consumer, tomorrow's consumer is all about transparency. And by the way, so are older people might know that transparency is going to be real. So that's something I think we need to deal with. We can make it an advantage, I think.
I think it's something that scares me, Dale. I think it's both problematic and not. I think that the chemophobia that's associated with people will be weaponized against us with all this anti-alcohol stuff. So as a basic thing, you hear the only thing on labels that we have on labels that's mandated is sulfites. You know what people complain about the most?
Sulfites.
I mean, fundamental, but I do agree with the calorie thing and the natural stuff. How do we get that more in the bit? I am worried about ingredients because people don't understand chemicals. It's like MSG, it's not, there's lots of things that can be weaponized against us, and we're already under a huge amount of scrutiny.
Emily, the other thing the term natural wine came up, and
Right.
I just not a very bit like I just think wine is natural. And whenever I'm asked the question, what do I think of natural wine? My question back to them is, tell me what an unnatural wine is.
Right.
Right. And you're going to get the same stammering and like wine's natural. End of story.
When there's a lot of, we chatted with someone that didn't know the difference between organically made wine or farmed wine. And so we were like, organically farmed wine is great. Can't go wrong with it. So, yeah, educating the consumer is an important point. We do have one more question that I think is worth asking. So let's look in your crystal ball. Will our future wine consumption base be as interested in obtaining deep knowledge of wine brands, regions, soils, etc., as our current population? Or are the days of massive wine collections dwindling?
There's probably going to be about somewhere between 7 and 13% of the population that is absolutely going to want that. There's always going to be that consumer that goes really, really deep on it and wants to know more knowledge. Interestingly to me, knowledge it's never been easier to get that knowledge. It's never been easier to do that kind of research and understand that. So I think it's going to grow, and that you're going to see that group of people who are really into it and really go very deep, at worst hold steady.
I think you have to break that question into two pieces. The first one, Dale's right. There's a subset of all communities that get really geeky about stuff and enjoy it. And I think that's going to be especially remote learning, like Napa Valley Wine Academy, helping people learn at home versus get into class. The second part of the question, the massive wine collection, is a completely different question, which was a phenomenon that I think happened in the late 90s when there was a huge delta between really high quality wines and not high quality wines. So collecting things like Silver Oak or stuff like that back in the day was very different. When now there's lots of great wines that you can be more promiscuous at that level. So I think the collection is a byproduct of more great wine at that price point versus the gap, between.
Finances play a role in that. Wine in general has gotten a lot more expensive, so that makes it more difficult. But those rare finds, there's always going to be people who are looking for that.
Wonderful. Paul, Dale, thank you guys so much. This was great information. Appreciate answering all the questions, and I appreciate your time and providing this presentation for our members. So thank you.
Absolutely. Emily, great to see you. Paul, great to see you. Talk soon.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Let us know if you have more questions. Emily, if more questions come across, please.
I will provide the recording and the contact information in the follow-up.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.